This is Stephanie March, food editor of Minneapolis St. Paul Magazine, and fellow foodies, it's the most wonderful time of the year, the Minnesota State Fair. And not only are foods on a stick, I'm bringing you a podcast on a stick. It's a show released daily during the run of the fair, covering the fair's best of the best, the must-eats, the new foods, the old favorites, plus events, hidden gems, and the shows you can't miss. We're going to cover it all. Just listen to Podcasts on a Stick. Find episodes on the Podcast One app or wherever you find your podcasts.
The following is a Podcast One Minnesota production.
For those who simply can't get enough talk about the Vikings, we present Bonus Chatter. Bonus chatter about your favorite team that's unscripted, unfiltered, and uninterrupted. This is another edition of 1500 ESPN's Purple Podcast.
Hello, welcome to another episode of the Purple Podcast. Matthew Coller here with you, and joining me for today's episode is Eric Smith, a writer for Vikings.com, and the reason I have brought Eric here to my home on our off day from training camp is to discuss his piece on Randy Moss, in which he talked to every quarterback except one that threw a touchdown in their career to Randy Moss. Or in Randy Moss's career, they threw touchdowns to him. So how many did it add up to, Eric?
Well, hello, first of all.
Hi.
It's good to
Happy
see
to have you. It's a
Thank
podcast. We get right into it.
Is this my inaugural visit on the podcast?
I don't believe you've been on before.
No. Well, thank you for having me.
I may have cited something that you wrote at some point, but other than that, this is the first time people are hearing you.
I'm a frequent listener, so you do a good job.
Oh, thank you very much. So you spent a really long time tracking down all of these quarterbacks. What was it? Do you remember the total? How many touchdowns he has?
Moss has 156 career receiving touchdowns, which is second all time. And there's 13 quarterbacks in Randy's Quarterback Club, which is what I called my long form feature on Vikings.com. And I talked to 12 of them, starting from his career in 98 to when he finished his final year was in San Francisco in 2012. It was he played a while, and there were a lot of interesting names and good stories in there.
There are some tremendous names, and anyone who listens to this podcast will be well aware of my love and joy for career backup quarterbacks. So we will get to some of them. But I want to start with Brad Johnson. So here's Brad Johnson in 1998 having to sit and watch Randall Cunningham throw all these touchdowns to Randy Moss. But Brad Johnson got the first one. So what did Brad Johnson have to say about getting the first one to Randy Moss and then having to, it must be torture to sit there and see another quarterback be able to just wing the ball in the air and Randy Moss jumping over people to get it.
Right. And that, when I came up with the idea for this project, Johnson was, I knew he was obviously the first one on the list, and he threw the first 2 touchdowns of Randy's career. But I really wanted to talk to him and ask him just that, man, you could have been the guy in 98,
right.
It could have been you. And first of all, Brad Johnson was great. He got back to me, I think, within 15 minutes of me reaching out to him. His memory is incredible. If you read the piece, like I said, he threw the first 2 touchdowns to Randy. Within 2 minutes, he's rattling off the play call of what it was. And this was 20 years ago. I asked him that. I'm like, do you have any sense of, remorse or, was it bittersweet that year in 98? And he said no. He said, would I have liked to play that year? Of course. But what I didn't realize is that he had neck surgery the year before in 97. And he said, his strength the year before was pretty much zapped. Mm-hmm. His quote to me was that he couldn't even hold a pencil in his hand. So for him to even make it back on the field in 98 was just, a huge win for him. And then he gets hurt again, obviously in week 2. He breaks his ankle, and then Randall comes in and, kind of the rest is history.
So if he doesn't break his ankle, maybe he's not able to do some of the same things Randall Cunningham did because Johnson was still battling with that injury.
True, yeah. Obviously Randall Cunningham probably had a little bit of a stronger arm. But, it worked out for Brad Johnson. He did go on to win a Super Bowl.
And Cunningham really wanted you to know in this piece that he had a stronger arm than people give him credit for at that point, because it was always on every broadcast. And when you go back and watch the highlights, it's just throw it as far as you can. You can't overthrow this guy, right? But Cunningham, I like in your article where he's kind of like, no, it wasn't the farthest I could throw it, which, yeah, it was.
Pretty much.
I mean, a lot of them were even coming up short, and Moss would just come back to the ball and make the plays. But he had to be pretty interesting, too, because that year is so random that it's Randall Cunningham and so memorable.
He was good. I'd talked to him previously for when Moss had gone into the Ring of Honor last year, and he was really good on that. His schedule was kind of hectic this time around, so I just got him for a few minutes. He had good stuff to say, but I think there were, in terms of gleaning some good stories and some good quotes, there were some other guys on the list who were just pretty much gold.
Well, one that I really liked was Jeff George. And when you think of a pure talent combination, if you were just going out there 7-on-7 and you wanted to beat any team in history, you might pick Jeff George with his arm throwing to Randy Moss. That would be unstoppable. And I love Jeff George's story talking about when he first got there and first got to throw with Randy Moss.
Yeah, Jeff George was great to talk to you. The fun thing about this project was that, you know the name, just being a football fan growing up, you know who Jeff George is. I forgot that he was the number 1 overall pick.
Yeah. Colts.
I mean, I was also 1 when he was picked, so, but yeah, no, his story that he said, so obviously back then we were at Winter Park, and he said he comes in and, they're going to have him throw in the indoor facility at Winter Park, and Randy happens to be there, and he tells Randy, hey, just run a deep post. But he's like, I'm going to throw it to you with my eyes closed. I just want to see if I can do it. And he's telling me the story. I'm like, what do you mean with your eyes closed? I'm like, you got to see where he's at. And he's like, no, I can do it. And he said he did a five-step drop. He just bombed it 50 yards down the field, hit him right in stride. And he's like, it was good, and that combination, it was only for, a couple games. But yeah, they had 8 touchdowns.
The highlights of Jeff George would make you think he was one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, because the ball comes out of his hand the same way it does for Dan Marino's. And I was just watching Moss highlights the other night, whatever it was, all of his 50-yard touchdowns or something like that. And when George releases the ball, it looks different from almost anyone I've ever seen throw the ball, aside from Brett Favre and Dan Marino. It's just the laser beam, and that combination with Randy Moss. You just wish that Jeff George has had a little bit more there, maybe in terms of how he processed the game, or maybe he didn't have the best attitude back then, and I put that lightly. Sounds like he had a fine attitude when he was talking to you, but back when he was playing, he wasn't always famous for being the best teammate. Yeah.
What's funny is that what I thought about a lot during this project, kind of like we said about Brad Johnson, Brad Johnson could have been the guy in 98. Mm-hmm. So Jeff George, Jeff George played with Randy in 99, and Cunningham was, I think he was benched or he was hurt. They didn't.
Yeah, they went 2-4, and they put him on the bench. Yeah.
So what if Jeff George played with them for another 5 years?
Right.
But by then they'd already drafted, in 99 they drafted Dante.
Right.
So like he knew, Jeff George had to know he wasn't going to be the long-term guy.
Right. I think one of the most impressive parts of this piece, which I tweeted it out, it's on your Twitter, it's on Vikings.com. It's not hard to find. I mean, it's out there. And Randy Moss replied himself to it.
He replied within 5 minutes. I was out golfing, and I'm like, holy F, Randy Moss is replying. Like, and he didn't call me out, but he had like a fun reply. So in my story, I called him the Freak. And
I see you've changed it to the Super Freak.
I'm like, heck yeah, I'm going to change it. If Randy Moss says it's Super Freak, then that's what we're going with.
That's right.
But it's out there if you want to check it out. I think I started this project in early May. We started kicking around Hall of Fame ideas, and so I've just been working on it here and there over the last couple of months.
So one of the most impressive parts of this is how you were able to track all these people down. Because some of them are out of the league. Some of them I barely know who they are. But with Dante Culpepper, he's not a guy that's really in the media a whole lot. I haven't heard much from him at all since I moved here in the beginning of 2016. I don't remember him doing much media. What did Culpepper remember about Moss? And I wonder, when you talk to him, we were going over with Brad Johnson, like, do you wish there was more there? I mean, Culpepper's got a little bit of that same thing with the knee injury, and you wonder how much better he would have been, or if he would have continued to play at that level if he didn't have that too. Right.
Yeah, so Dante is the number one person on the list in terms of number of touchdowns. He threw 53 to Randy in the time they played together for, I think it was parts of 5 seasons, almost 5 seasons total with injuries. And you wonder if he had been healthy, if Randy hadn't been traded, because, Randy showed in 2007 that he still had it.
Right.
So imagine if Randy played another 4 or 5 years with Dante, that could have been a lethal combination for an entire decade rather than just 5 years.
Now, Dante didn't happen to bring up the lateral. Allow me to promo my article as well that I worked on for Moss going to the
Hall. I'll allow it. It's great. I read it. Nick Ferguson is a savage, and he had me laughing so hard.
Yes, I had a chance to talk to the guy that nearly tackled Randy Moss before he lateraled to Mo Williams, and I also spoke with Mo Williams as well. And what you're alluding to is that Nick Ferguson called out everybody. And my guess is that he's friends with those guys still, so he felt comfortable doing that. And Nick is also a great personality. He's done broadcasting and stuff like that. So we were having a great time recounting it. But he's still mad at everyone who stopped playing thinking that Randy was going to go down and they were going to go into the half. And it was great listening to him talk about just demoralizing opponents. And I'm sure from you talking to all these quarterbacks too, you got the same impression that it wasn't just that he would make highlight reel plays. It was that he was impossible to stop, and he could do things that you couldn't even imagine him doing. And there's a level of intimidation there that's incredible.
Yeah, and it's kind of like what you said. You have a big love and affinity for backup quarterback. So I talked to Todd Bauman. He's on the list. He had 4 touchdowns. He played 2 games. I think he started 2 games with the Vikings. He threw 4 touchdowns to Randy.
I would do the same.
But, okay, he actually started 3 games in his career for the Vikings, and he threw 4 touchdowns to Randy. And one of them, the one he said that impressed him the most, if you look at the highlight of it, it was just a bubble screen that Randy just juked and evaded half the defense, and he went 75 yards.
Yeah. And that's the part that we sort of leave out of our memories with Randy Moss is he could run if they handed him the ball. He could punt return. He could take a bubble screen all the way. One of them against Dallas, I think, in that famous Thanksgiving game, is a bubble screen. He just goes all the way.
Yeah, I think it's just a quick out pass. And if you watch that clip's on YouTube, if you watch it closely, you can see Mike Zimmer on the sideline. He looks, he's 20 years younger, but he still looks pretty pissed. Now,
there's a great story in here from a guy that I talked to last year and had a great time talking to, which is Gus Farad. And he was talking about playing a game where Randy was hurt. Randy was trying to play through an injury, and he didn't throw it to Randy on a play. Fill in the rest for me.
Did Gus tell you the same story?
No, he didn't, but he told you the story, so I want you to tell the rest.
Okay, yeah.
Since your
article. Gus is another guy who only played, I think, 2 games. He started 2 games in 2003, but he threw 5 touchdowns to Randy. So Randy just inflated the stats for a lot of these guys.
I have so much respect for these backup quarterbacks who are like, you know what? I'm just going to throw the ball to Randy Moss and see what happens.
Pretty much. Yeah. So Gus was telling me that it was, I think, week 3 in 2003, and I think Culpepper was injured, so he goes in, and they're playing the Lions. And apparently Randy had a bad back that game. And so, Gus was telling me how, a lot of teams ran cover 2 where they had a safety over the top to kind of help out with the deep ball. And Gus came in, and Randy tells him, I don't care what the play is. I'm just going to run by the safety. And Gus is like, oh, okay, whatever. So he goes, Gus, the play goes on. Gus doesn't throw him the ball. And so Randy comes back to the huddle, and Gus is like, he is irate, and he's yelling at me, he's like, I'm going to put my hand up and run by the safety, throw me the ball. And for Gus, you're like, well,
of course, Randy Moss going for the ball.
So he throws it up. Play goes for 72 yards. It wasn't a touchdown. Randy got tackled at the 3. But that was the first completed pass from Farad to Moss.
Andrew Walter is one of the great names on this list. One of the great names in backup quarterback history, I think, just for me, because anybody who randomly ends up starting a half a season or a season and basically never plays again is just my favorite. And Andrew Walter has one of the worst careers ever in terms of a number standpoint. Listen to this. Yeah, I know you looked it up, but you found a great way to make something sound good about him in Oakland. In 2006, he went 2-6 with 3 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, and was sacked 46 times in 8 starts. Andrew Walter. And here's what you came up with. And your politeness here is just tremendous. You came up with his highest touchdown percentage came when throwing to Randy Moss. That's good work there.
Well, first of all, I have a deep affinity for Andrew Walter. As you can tell by the hat I'm wearing, I am a graduate of Arizona State.
I didn't know Andrew Walter was Arizona State guy.
Did
you guys reflect?
Andrew Walter is Arizona State's all-time leading passer. And so I was...
So you were nervous. I mean, you're talking to all these other quarterbacks. You're like, who cares about you?
But when I got Walter on the phone,
Andrew Walter, I was shaking. Okay, now this is big man on campus.
We reflected a little bit. His career was in the mid-2000s, and I didn't get to ASU until 2007.
Oh, okay.
So I literally just missed his career. But you know what? For as bad as that team was, and maybe his stats don't look great, he threw literally three career touchdowns. Every single one of them to Randy, including Randy's 100th touchdown of his career. 100 touchdown catch.
That's pretty awesome.
And
he only threw 3 touchdowns that season, 06, and he ends up getting the 100th touchdown.
I think stories like that is what made this project fun.
Yeah.
Because you're like, I came up with the list, and I'm like, well, who are some of these guys? And what's their story? And, yeah, I think Walter might be one of my favorite, chapters per se in this entire piece, just because he was also great about it. He knew,
right.
if you read the quote, he's like, our time in Oakland was not easy, it was very difficult. We didn't want to win a lot of games. He knows it was bad.
Yeah.
But he also says, hey, I threw all 3 of my touchdowns to Randy. So hey, there's that.
That is the reason that I love backup quarterbacks. It's not that I just want to make fun of them because they're so random and they end up on Madden games from 2006 that when I pull out, I can be like, oh yeah, that guy. That's part of it. But also, they usually end up having great stories. I mean, the starters have great stories too, but everyone knows all those. Mm-hmm. The backups, we talked on this podcast with Matt Blanchard, who no one would really know unless you're from Wisconsin.
I don't know who that is, yeah. Yeah,
he was a practice squad guy with Green Bay, went to Wisconsin Whitewater, and then briefly with the Bears too, a couple other teams. But he ended up as a practice squad guy for behind Aaron Rodgers, Andrew Luck, and Cam Newton at different points. So here is this guy that you don't really know, but he got to spend every day with 3 of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. So he's got great stories and great analysis from seeing them right there out on the field. And a lot of these backup quarterbacks, it's the same way. And you probably also eventually develop some pride in it and a little bit where you could pick on yourself. And I think that's probably Andrew Walter. But the great part of his section is talking about Randy as a person. And this is what I really like what you did here with this piece, is you got everyone to talk about him beyond the field because he was adversarial sometimes with the media, which made it harder for them to talk about him as a person. But Andrew Walter tells a story here of Randy Moss spending like $10,000 to make sure that he got all of his tickets so he could get his family in to see him play.
Right.
I mean, that's the stuff people don't know about.
Right. And, I kind of wondered how to balance that, because I do work for the Vikings, right? And so I didn't want, people to think, oh, he's just writing this puff piece on Randy Moss. But it was genuine. I didn't ask people, tell me all the good things about Randy Moss. And, let's make this a great portrait of Randy Moss. All I asked him was, do you have a favorite memory or, what was it like to be around Randy every day? I wanted to get their honest opinion. And yeah, pretty much every guy had good stuff to say. Some of it didn't make it in to the story. I had to kind of, edit it a little bit. But yeah, Randy gets that reputation, of maybe not being the most easy guy to work with all the time, especially for media. I'm sure, there were tough times for everyone. But, I mean, his teammates loved him, and Kerry Collins said the same thing. He's like, I love Randy as a teammate.
And I've found the same thing talking with other players that played with him, that the way they viewed him inside the locker room, Mo Williams told me this for the lateral piece, is he said no player was there ever a bigger gap between what people thought outside and what people thought inside.
Yeah.
That they didn't look at him like a diva. They didn't look at him like a guy who didn't try, because they saw him Monday through Saturday, too, out on the practice field. And a lot of these guys talk about how fun he was to practice with and how competitive he was at practice. Well, that's something that the media is not seeing all the time.
Right.
Maybe you just get little glimpses of that, but you don't see on a daily basis what it's like to go out there and compete with him. And that's why the perspective is so interesting. Now, Favre. You got to email back and forth with Favre, which, by the way, Brett emails kind of like all of our moms email.
All caps
sometimes. Right. But
not the best grammar.
Exactly. But he's got, my mom is a reading teacher, so
good grammar.
She has good grammar. Maybe I will say grandparents will email with the capital letters and the exclamation points and things like that. But Brett Favre had some cool stories, and he really didn't play with Moss a ton.
It was only a handful of games when Randy came back in 2010. And what's funny is, as I'm working on the piece, I tried to keep it pretty low key. I didn't want a lot of people to know I was working on it because I didn't want anyone to steal my idea.
Right.
But the couple people maybe around the organization, I think I probably told you about it somewhat early. And I just for fun, I'd be like, well, can you name some of the guys?
Yeah.
And almost everyone forgot that Favre threw him a touchdown. And what's ironic is that Moss caught Favre's 500th career touchdown. Of all the guys, of all the guys, you would think that, the two guys who were division rivals for years, and were, at the top of their game, that somehow, some way down the road, that Randy would catch Favre's 500 touchdown. So,
again, Vikings.com is the place to find it, or what's your Twitter? They can follow you on Twitter, see your stuff.
Eric_L_Smith.
Oh, boy.
I have a pretty common last name, so I have a pretty unique Twitter handle.
The underscores, though, brutal. It's just awful.
My last name, man.
They make it so hard to find.
I know.
Man.
What are you going to do?
You are headed to Canton, which is why I invited you over today to do this. So what are you looking forward to the most about seeing Randy Moss go in the Hall of Fame?
I think actually his induction speech on Saturday night, because
definitely,
who knows what we're gonna get?
Right?
I mean, he. I'm sure he'll have some great stories to tell. Mm-hmm. Personally, I'm excited just to see the Hall of Fame. I've never been there, and I don't know when I'll be able to go back after this. It's kind of a cool personal moment to go see it. And just because Randy is such a beloved figure for Vikings fans.
Yeah.
I imagine there's going to be a lot of purple there.
Yeah.
And
I think so.
People are going to be fired up to see him go in. I'm looking forward to a fun weekend.
The speech, definitely. And when he gets to talking about Dennis Green is the part that I'm looking forward to the most, mm-hmm. because when we had a press conference.
We had a small glimpse of that.
Yeah. And it was, he really opened up then, which I think surprised all of us, just to go in the Ring of Honor and to open up to the media like that. It was very surprising, mm-hmm. and kind of shows you where Randy Moss is in his life now, as opposed to where he might have been when he was very defensive with the media. And this is the opportunity, I think, for him to let it all loose and say whatever he wants to get out there. So could it be a Michael Jordan moment for him?
I was going to say,
right?
maybe it's like MJ, yeah.
Because I don't think that he ever let go the draft thing. I think that still drives him. I think he thinks about it on a daily basis now, that he can't believe he was drafted where he was drafted.
Where do you think he would have been picked? Number 2 behind Peyton Manning?
Yeah, I think so. Or number 3. Number 3, probably Ryan Leaf still.
You think so?
Well, he was a great prospect. He busted not so much because of his arm or anything. It was really just because of his head. But quarterbacks being as valuable as they are, probably. But
Charles Woodson was also up there.
he'd go before Woodson, I think.
I think so, too.
For me.
Yeah.
But, yeah, clearly in any other draft that doesn't have Peyton Manning, and Ryan Leaf was thought to be that sort of generational prospect too, any draft that doesn't have those guys, he's the number 1 overall pick, which would have been insane for a wide receiver, but he was that dominant. And my favorite thing about watching his highlights is just when he throws the hand up. Like you mentioned, that's why I loved reading the Gus Frerotte part is...
Yeah, with the Lions, yeah.
Yeah, when he just throws the hand up, and it's like, this guy is running full speed with his hand in the air, and the guy who's guarding him probably runs a 4.4 or under and still has no chance. It's incredible. So, well, I hope you have a great time and look forward to your Vikings.com coverage. And thanks for stopping by my house to record this.
I appreciate it.
And I appreciate all of you taking the time to listen to the Purple Podcast. We'll talk to you again soon.
This is Stephanie March, food editor of Minneapolis St. Paul Magazine, and fellow foodies, it's the most wonderful time of the year, the Minnesota State Fair. And not only are foods on a stick, I'm bringing you a podcast on a stick. It's a show released daily during the run of the fair, covering the fair's best of the best, the must-eats, the new foods, the old favorites, plus events, hidden gems, and the shows you can't miss. We're going to cover it all. Just listen to Podcasts on a Stick. Find episodes on the Podcast One app or wherever you find your podcasts.
I'm Rita Foley with an AP News Minute. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis was there to greet the McCain family last night as Senator and war hero John McCain's body was flown to a military base outside Washington. Today, McCain's body will lie in state under the Capitol Rotunda. AP Washington correspondent Sagar Magani.
After a memorial service yesterday in his adopted home of Arizona, a military jet flew McCain's body east to Joint Base Andrews, where he was greeted with an Armed Forces tribute. He's now lying in state at the U.S. Capitol, where he's served for so many years, and where the public will be allowed to file in on what's expected to be a stormy day here in Washington. McCain will be buried Sunday.
Ariana Grande and Stevie Wonder will sing, and former President Clinton will speak at Aretha Franklin's funeral today in Detroit. But organizers promise this will be a service, not a show. An American man's pleaded not guilty to assault in Uganda after video footage showed him punching a hotel worker. I'm Rita Foley.